Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. There are a few people still logging in, so we will get started in a couple of minutes. Alrighty. Hello, my name is Alex Vasquez, and I'm the Security Practice Manager for Accudata Systems. I'll be moderating today's webinar. We want to thank you for joining us, and welcome to today's webinar, Ransomware's Next Steps. Now, before we get started, I'd like to go over a few action items. First, because this is a live webinar, feel free to ask questions through the chat window in your browser. If we're unable to get to your question today, we will respond personally to your questions through email. So please allow up to 24 hours for those responses. After the webinar today, each attendee will receive a post-webinar email that will include a full recording of today's webinar, as well as a copy of the slides and resources to help with your defense against ransomware. So today, I'm joined by an extremely knowledgeable Palo Alto expert by the name of Joseph Pointer. So Joseph is a cybersecurity specialist who enjoys examining viruses, testing exploits, and improving security by implementing one of the best threat prevention products in the industry. Joseph knows that the best way to secure an enterprise is through automation and native integration of security products. So we are excited to have Joseph join us for our webinar today. So please welcome Joseph Pointer with Palo Alto Networks.
All right, everybody. Thanks for taking some time out of your day to listen to me talk a little bit more about ransomware and where we see things going with it. Ransomware has been an interesting use case that I still remember when it first started popping up in the market with any sort of prevalence back around 2013. And it always shocked me at how quickly ransomware was able to march forward and implement new features and basically figure out how to get our money out of our wallets by holding stuff hostage. And I think one of the most interesting evolutions that I ever saw was at one time I had a customer call me up, say, hey, we got hit with ransomware, can you come out and help us? And I went out on site and I'd never seen it before, but the ransomware not only encrypted their files and locked them out of it, but it also displayed some adult images on the screen as well in order to try and embarrass the customer even further into paying the ransom quicker. And so ransomware from a specific threat family is one of the first that we've seen where the evolution of the family itself has just happened at a breakneck pace. And a lot of this can be simply attributed to how much money the ransomware families are making out of these campaigns. Let's take a look for a little bit of historical context. What you're seeing on the screen is just how quickly ransomware has gained favor, but this is only through Q1 of 2016. Suffice it to say, the threat of ransomware has grown, and while I could have found an image depicting everything all the way to present day, any image that I found all across the internet had so much data after about 2016 that it became completely illegible unless you had something like a projector with a big screen. There's that many ransomware families and variants that exist today. So what is ransomware really? Most think of ransomware in its traditional and most common form, its cryptographic form. Attackers identify valuable data on a compromised system, encrypt and hold it hostage unless the victim makes a payment. But ransomware is much, much more than this. It's a criminal business model wherein attackers get their victims to pay to prevent something. In this case, most of the time, the loss of data and productivity. There's actually really good news for practitioners and InfoSec professionals. Too often, we're faced with budgets that don't give us the funding we need to protect our organizations on a level we'd like. I think we've all ran into these scenarios where we would like to implement some piece of security or enhancement, and we get told no because there's not any budget available. So whether it be technology or finding the right people with skill sets, we're left rolling the dice on a daily basis against attacks. But ransomware has become so mainstream now, it's given us an opportunity to actually be proactive, have these conversations with our executive teams and those controlling the budgets about shoring up our defenses and implementing a modern prevention strategy to combat these modern threats. Gone are the days where only InfoSec professionals knew about a threat or a breach or ransomware. We're actually at the stage where ransomware hits the main newsstand pages almost monthly, and our common CEOs, C-level suites are aware of them too. All right. Because ransomware has the ability to cripple not only corporate organizations, but really any industry, education, governments, healthcare, nobody is truly immune to ransomware. Not only does it cripple our individual users' laptops, but large-scale operation systems, central databases, ERP systems, sales, quoting, tools, logistics, the whole 9 yards. The downstream impact of a successful ransomware attack can total in hundreds of millions by taking down applications that our organizations rely on to drive revenue. Because they know the impact it can cause, attackers target organizations more and more and are pushing the thresholds on what they're demanding for ransom. Ask yourself how much you'd be willing to pay to avoid a business impact of hundreds of millions of dollars. Both FedEx and Maersk, global shipping companies, both affected by recent ransomware attacks, publicly acknowledged dips of at least $300 million each. FedEx cut its profit by around $300 million and saw a drop around 3.4% in its stock price following the announcement. And Maersk divulged that they lost $300 million due to $135 million lost in sales and approximately $175 million costs spread across the cost of goods sold and operating expense lines. They're also expecting a similar impact next quarter from the ransomware attack. In a report published towards the end of 2016, BitSight Technology, who focuses on managing risk and assessing security, found that education was actually the most prone to ransomware. While the ransom demands may not be quite as large as, say, a big financial institution or a big shipping company, school systems and other sectors where budgets are incredibly tight feel the pain immensely. 40 county schools in South Carolina, for example, paid out nearly $10,000 in May of 2016. While some on the line may not feel that that's too awfully bad, our children are the ones feeling the impact with things like payment for school lunches and computerized entrance exams for other programs in education eliminated to offset the loss that those people had to pay towards the ransom. Healthcare is another core industry where it comes down to more than just money. The UK's National Health Service, when hit with WannaCry, were forced to cancel over 19,000 appointments and operations, and were left with over 12,000 pieces of diagnostic equipment rendered useless, and found their communication network entirely crippled, relying instead on WhatsApp as their main communication channel. While we try and think of how much we would pay to avoid financial impact to our organization, there's an even larger moral dilemma we must face when we take human life into consideration, as in with the hospital situation. So let's talk about kind of where ransomware is going and what we're seeing. Like any other modern organization trying to optimize their revenue and profits, the name of the game with ransomware is getting your product out to the masses. While developing your own attack code and using it may produce faster profit, it also introduces higher rates of risk. To lower their risk and obtain a steady income flow, attackers have begun selling their code to other would-be attackers with ransomware DIY kits. This version of CryptoLocker, for example, can be purchased for $400 and includes key features such as encrypting backup elements like external media and network shares. It's designed to evade traditional AV and even comes with multi-language support. And when you think about that, how many enterprise products out there don't even have multi-language support? Yet ransomware, they've gone through the hassle of doing that themselves. Do-it-yourself ransomware kits can go from anywhere to a few dollars to thousands, depending on the complexity and sophistication of the attack, leading some reports to estimate that novice attackers using these tools can make upwards of $100,000 a year. This has led to a mature business model, complete with development, support, distribution, quality assurance, and even help desks that rival legitimate organizations' own efforts when it comes to software. Even ransomware enterprises know that ease of use is the name of the game and make sure that the customers are proficient with their ransomware tools and victims have an easy understanding and step-by-step guides around how to pay. I think one of the interesting variants that I actually saw where they were demanding ransom in Bitcoin, of course, it had an entire how-to page and YouTube video centered around how somebody could go and purchase a Bitcoin to then pay the ransom, including a help desk that they could actually call to help them figure out how to buy Bitcoin to pay the ransom. Very sophisticated pieces of malware. And attackers are truly becoming more brazen in the advertising of their products as attacks. And they continue to be successful with very few syndicates actually being taken down by law enforcement. What you see on this screen was created by the group Rainmaker Labs. And unlike most ransomware kits that remain in the shadows of the dark web, this group actually was openly advertising online. In fact, there's still a YouTube video showing a demonstration of one of their kits called Philadelphia and how easy it was to run and even use, and they marketed their award-winning support to help you through the process of using their tools. While many groups continue to keep their content solely on the dark web, how much longer till we see more and more ransomware companies advertising in the open? And as the world moves more and more towards a workforce enabled with cyber skills, how much longer can we rely on the ignorance of traditional criminals to not realize just how easy it is to perpetrate these kind of attacks? It's a very small investment towards hardware and little know-how. While ransomware as a service is not necessarily new, the glossy, overt marketing of a do-it-yourself ransomware attack is. It's surprisingly sophisticated that what Rainmaker Labs is trying to do here. Details about Philadelphia are out in the open on the World Wide Web as opposed to underground and secretive on the deeper dark web, which is where most other ransomware kits are marketed. You don't even need a Tor browser to find Philadelphia, and the fact that it's being brazenly peddled is sobering and ultimately indicative of what's about to come. Another type of ransomware that we've seen out in the wild encrypts files and then gives the victims 96 hours to pay a ransom. It's advertised as fully undetectable and can be deployed in EXE, BAT, DLL, SCR, screensaver files, and even CMD. In an added twist, it deletes a randomly selected file every 6 hours if the ransom is not paid. Just in case prospective buyers think that $39 for this solution is too good to be true, the creators have produced a YouTube video that even shows the program in action. The affordable pricing certainly shows that cybercriminals are constantly perfecting their business approach. But experienced cybercriminals, the ones with the broadest reach and the most resources to invest, know that the price is not the most important aspect for ransomware as a service. The stability, flexibility, and sophistication of the cryptoware are paramount for them. That's one reason why established ransomware families are the ones that cybersecurity researchers detect in the wild most frequently. However, the price and aggressive marketing might attract the attention of less experienced online attackers who are looking to get in on the action. We recently have seen one, about mid-2016, that actually was a ransomware kit that was free. Anybody could go out, sign up for it, and get a ransomware as a service account. And their specific model was around they would take a cut of the profits. And for the more endpoints that you infected and got to pay out, they actually would give you a bulk discount. So 0 to 10, they got 30%. 10 to 100, they would take less percentage and give you more money, and on down. It sounds like a traditional sales model, to be honest, where payouts are basically commission-based on how successful you are. If you don't believe me on some of this information and how easy it is, go ahead and after this presentation, go over to YouTube and plug in ransomware how-to. And just like any other how-to guide, like fixing your house or building on to something or repairing a car, you'll find countless videos walking people through how to create their own ransomware, labeled as educational, of course, with thousands of views in a matter of months. Ransomware isn't really in the shadows anymore. It's out in the open for all to see, learn, and execute. So let's talk a little bit about how we can break this attack lifecycle. Palo Alto Networks feels like we have an excellent product where not only do you have a firewall that is one solution and an endpoint solution that are completely separate and don't talk, we've paired them together where they both share and leverage data amongst each other so that you're not just protected on one aspect of the kill chain, you're protected across all aspects. Let's take a look at some of the pieces that we do. We call it multi-method malware prevention, and the idea that we basically have here is that an attack basically has a number of steps that an attacker has to do in order to be successful. They have to get the malware, the attachment, whatever, onto a desktop. Then they have to trick the end user into executing it. Then they have to bypass the antivirus, and so on and so on. Our goal here is to put as many barriers in between the attacker and your data as we possibly can. Our first barrier that we put into play is a massive amount of threat intelligence. This is represented by our Wildfire Threat Intelligence Cloud, which gets around 210 million new artifacts every month of good and bad malware. Just as a fun little statistic, most people consider VirusTotal the paramount of virus knowledge. Like if you said, where do I go to find out if something is a virus, you go to VirusTotal. We regularly submit our threats into VirusTotal just to kind of compare, and typically about 60% of the threats that we've identified are not in VirusTotal. That's how complete our Threat Intelligence Cloud is. Now, the Threat Intelligence Cloud is there. It's wonderful. When somebody double-clicks on a file, if it's ever been seen in the wild that we know it's bad, it'll be instantly blocked on an endpoint. It'll be instantly blocked on a firewall. But there's always the opportunity where somebody is in an offline state. I travel myself personally, and I open up attachments while I'm on a plane disconnected from the internet, so we have to make sure and protect from those scenarios. We do that with local analysis, which is on the screen right now. And our local analysis module is a signature-based engine, or excuse me, signature-less based engine, slip of the tongue there, signature-less based engine that rather than look at whether or not a file contains a registry key or is called virus.exe, we look at its capabilities. So does it try and hide from the end user? Does it have an invalid code signing certificate? Does it try and gain persistence by adding itself into the startup registry areas on a machine? And we look at around 2 million of these different criteria for a specific piece of malware. And essentially, if we have enough bad capabilities on a specific file, it doesn't matter that it's not called ransomware.exe. We know that it has very bad potential, and we'll block it. And I think the most important thing about local analysis for us is that it's extremely fast, around 100 milliseconds to evaluate a file. So no more of that old scanning, a piece of file to figure out if it's good or bad. Within 100 milliseconds of somebody double-clicking on it, we know whether it's good or bad, and we'll block it or allow it. And that's all done offline if needed. Now, a couple other pieces that we do. Malicious process prevention is a large one that helps us protect against ransomware attack. And you can think of these as common sense rules for the operating system. Okay? We've all opened up a Word document, but very rarely have we opened up a Word document and had it launch PowerShell and think to ourselves, you know what, I really want Word interacting with PowerShell. Or you know what, I really want Word interacting with cmd.exe or cscript or wscript. And so these types of rules basically prevent those types of potentially malicious interactions where a benign application stretches over what it should normally do and calls something that could be potentially malicious. So Word, PowerPoint, Excel, those are not allowed and they're blocked from calling potentially malicious areas in the operating system like PowerShell and CMD. And the final piece that we've actually introduced very recently is a behavior-based ransomware protection. And the way that I like to think about this is what we've done is we've seeded our machines that we're protecting with files that appear as very alluring targets for a piece of ransomware. So you can imagine PowerPoint, JPEG, Excel spreadsheets, and things like that. And we've seeded them all over the operating system, but we've hidden them from the end user and made them available to all the other programs. So the end user looks on their machine and they don't see anything different, but a piece of ransomware lands and it sees these PowerPoint files and these Excel spreadsheets. And if it touches them, we know that it's something malicious. It's not the end user doing the action, and we block it. It by itself is a very unique way of detecting ransomware. So let's quickly take a look at a demonstration. Give me just a moment to pull up my other machine and take a look at what it looks like. All right, so I have a machine right here. It's a virtual machine, just I do that for safety reasons. I've only given it 1 core and 1 gig of RAM, about the minimum that you could possibly expect the operating system to actually run under those conditions. And I do that to kind of demonstrate that even though we've given this machine very little resources, we don't slow the machine down like a traditional antivirus would. So this is a whole bunch of ransomware I downloaded last week. We're going to click on them and see what happens. So I run it, and you can see I immediately get back a response. And where we see the information right here, wildfire. Now what that means from a practical perspective is that somebody in the world somewhere has executed this malware. We already know about it, and we just went ahead and blocked it. There's no computational resources required on the endpoint. I just queried wildfire and said, is this bad? Yes, it's bad. Now block it. I'm going to run a couple other samples here, and let's see if we can find one that's caught by local analysis. This one was wildfire as well. And we may not. It kind of depends on the day and what I run, whether or not we already know about them as malicious or whether or not some of them get caught by local analysis. But as you can see, this isn't a slow process. For the end user, they aren't noticing any machine slowdown. Here's one that's local analysis. So what happened here is we double-clicked on it, we queried wildfire, and wildfire said, no, I've never seen it. Now what's happening in the background is this file is actually being uploaded to our threat cloud for even more analysis. But in the meantime, while that upload's happening, we passed it off to our local analysis engine, and you saw with no slowdown, we get an immediate verdict back that this is bad. Our local analysis engine evaluated it and said it has too many malicious characteristics associated, and go ahead and block it. Now, for fun, I have a modified version of PowerShell that I run on my machine. And let's take a look. If I go dir and we'll give it a second to catch up, we can see a whole bunch of files in my root of C that are txt.doc and so on. These are those landmine files that I was talking about. Now, as an end user, if I go in and I click on C, I don't see any of those files. Even if I exposed hidden folders and files, those wouldn't be shown. But if I come in and I say delete one of them because I'm a piece of ransomware and I'm looking for SQL files, and I say delete, we immediately, like I said, I kind of compared it to a landmine, will immediately kill the process because you triggered our anti-ransomware protection. You weren't supposed to access that file. Okay? So it's those types of common sense preventions, not only from a scripting perspective, but from our anti-ransomware module, but also Wildfire having the amount of data that it does available that truly brings to bear a solution that is powerful enough to protect an industry from ransomware. Got just a couple of more slides if we can jump back in. Let me quickly talk about some of our awards, because for a lot of people, they haven't heard of Traps, and so they say, well, I'm not sure whether the solution is really as good as Joe says it is. So we constantly go through cycles and iterations with third-party testing vendors, and we've gotten awards from both AV Comparatives and AV Test that Traps blocked 100% of the real-world threats. Now, what that really equates to is that the testing people at those agencies, they go out, they try and find as real malware as possible without us knowing ahead of time what it is, and they throw it against our solution and see what we catch. 100% score on that front is very, very good, and it indicates to our customers that we have the capacity to protect their systems. Not only that, we have a paper on and return on investment. We're around 82% ROI, and as well compliance papers on PCI and HIPAA. So this truly equates to a solution that can protect your environment, isn't going to break the bank, and keep you safe and sleeping well at night. Now I'm going to go ahead and turn it back over to our host. We're coming up on our time limit, so let's go ahead and we can wrap up.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Joseph. Okay, for the audience, if y'all are interested in learning more, and if you'd like to get more hands-on experience with Palo Alto Traps, you can request a Palo Alto Networks Ultimate Test Drive for Traps from your Accudata account manager. So the Ultimate Test Drive for Traps is basically a set of lab exercises that will allow you and your team to configure and then see traps in action through various scenarios. We can either host the Ultimate Test Drive on-site at your premises, or Accudata is more than happy to host it at our new office here in Houston. Also, if you're looking to better understand your overall security posture against industry standards and best practices, you can also request an Accudata security health check from your respective Accudata account manager. The security health check will identify gaps in your security and help build a security roadmap that you can also use to help with budgeting for your security initiatives. So with that being said, at this time we will begin our live Q&A. We did receive a couple questions during the webinar. So I'm going to go ahead and go through a few of these questions here. So our first question is, can Traps integrate with Palo Alto Networks Next-Gen Firewall?
Absolutely. So part of our goal here was to make a solution that was truly integrated, where each piece builds on and supports the other. So one of the most common scenarios where we see a integration between the endpoint and the firewall is, let's say somebody brings in malware on a thumb drive, or they bring it in on their phone, just transferring files across. When somebody double clicks on that on the endpoint, we evaluate it, we convict the file, and we say that it's bad, and through our Wildfire integration, we pass that information off to the firewall. So somebody double clicks on it, they can't read the file, what do? They email it to their buddy and they say, hey man, can you open this and see, because I can't. And what will happen as soon as they email it, when it flows across our firewall, we'll have already recognized that it's bad and will prevent the spread even further. So there are other ways that we integrate, but that's a very common scenario that we help with.
Okay, great. Thanks, Joseph. Next question. Is Traps still effective when it does not have internet connectivity?
Absolutely. So we get a boost in effectiveness, of course, when we're online and we can query things like our threat database like Wildfire. But when we're offline, our local analysis engine is more than capable of convicting threats. Typically in an offline analysis, we're still 99% effective at catching threats just by itself without any cloud lookups or internet connectivity.
Great. Thanks, Joseph. Okay, next question. So knowing that for the initial demo, the demo you just showed, you were using files that were already downloaded. The question is, ideally, would those files have been blocked incoming or when downloaded? I guess at what aspect would in a typical customer use case would those files have been detected and blocked?
So depends a little bit on the customer scenario. For one, that wouldn't make a very interesting demo, just downloading files and then saying that they're blocked. So I let them get downloaded. But for most of our customers in general, we actually don't block on things like scans because traditional AV does scans like it's been doing for the last 10 years, and we all complain about how slow it makes our machines. The whole reason why traditional AV had to do scans in the first place was to try and get ahead of the execution of the threat. Okay, so we got to scan it long before somebody double clicks on it, because when they double click on it, it explodes and gets all over the place. So with our solution, a lot of people don't bother with scanning because at the end of the day, a file can only do something when it's double clicked on and when it executes. So by only convicting on the execution, you save a lot of system resources for the end user. And in fact, we've seen some customers extend their system refresh cycle because when they removed a traditional AV, they got so much system performance back on the endpoint that they didn't need to refresh as quickly.
Okay, great. Here's our last question. How is Traps client deployed to end users' PCs?
So we followed standard programming methodologies. Our agents are MSI-based for Windows, DMG-based for Mac. So the most standard approach that most customers do is they push us out with a systems management tool. So whether that be, you can even do something as simple as a GPO, or if you use some other systems management tool, you can push us out that way.
Okay, great. Well, thank you so much, Joseph. We appreciate that. And for the audience, this concludes today's webinar and live Q&A. Thank you again for joining us today. And as mentioned at the beginning of the webinar, you will receive an email with a recording of today's webinar. And if you have any additional questions, please feel free to contact me directly, Alex Vasquez, Security Practice Manager for Accudata Systems. Thank you again, and have a great day.